ECURATORS that we're doing currently. So ECURATORS is a multi-case qualitative study of digital practice in archaeological research, curation, and communication. And in this talk, we're going to be talking very, very briefly about one particular case study, which is research on two archaeological projects that we are studying. We've studied recently the Pila Kutso-Petria Archaeological Project and the Western Algorithm Regional Survey. We submitted already a paper for publication, co-authored by some of my research assistants in the project, Zach Batiste, Val Master, Stephanie Torma, and also collaborators, senior collaborators, Michael Carter, Neil Ferris, Esther Hufila, Seamus Ross, and myself as well. And basically, the study is based on semi-open interviews with 15 project participants in the two projects, the archaeological projects. So what we wanted to find out is, how do these field archaeologists conceive of their own research practice in the light of what they say on the nature of learning, conducting fieldwork, digital tool use, the role of researchers, and the logic of the research work as well. And we hope to contribute to a growing and significant literature. Some of you will recognize your names in this partial list of important references in that field. So what we did, initially we started with ontology domain modeling. That was a first step. And we used an activity theory orientation for that. So our model is based on the notion of activity, which is directed towards an object, which employs also mediating tools of different kinds, digital tools, but also knowledges and competences. Subjects can be individuals, but also communities of practice, and activities take place by tool mediation. That initial model looks a bit like this, with activity in the center and archaeological objects, motives, persons, groups, methods, activity types all around it. But what we realized is that this is one particular orientation, which is a realist orientation. We ask people in interviews and we try to find out what they do, right? However, there's this second dimension that we were very much interested in, that really gave rise to a different domain that we wanted to investigate through these interviews, which is not what people do, but what people think of. Is the notion of the constructionist orientation in our study that really dominated our work. How participants conceive their practices. And for this, we also leaned then on expanding our modeling stage of the research with an additional model based on our practical argumentation work in the past. What we did is we analyzed the data using ManxQDA. So those of you who are familiar with this kind of work will know that we transcribe the interviews and then we annotate practically segments using terms that very often in our work, in our orientation, come up really from the bottom up. So we identify things in the field based on, however, on an original coding scheme that you see there on the left, that this represents very, very much our notion of integrating figuration domain, what people think, with an activity domain, what they're talking about with relation to the work that they do, the tools that they use, the methods that they use, etc., etc. So through this, we needed to modify effectively our model. We have the sayings in the center. Sayings, what people say about their work, are very much in the center. And we shouldn't forget that these sayings, what people say about how they do their work, are also discursive kinds of doings. They do things through those because they affect and they shape very, very much ideas about how fieldwork is conducted. And then what we did is we moved everything to a graph database, Neo4j, in which what we do there is like we can have results, various segments of text represented according to what they are, but also shown in a graph. And this is how we conducted queries in order to analyze the data. So what did we find out then? What we did is like we tried to figure out, as a proto-grounded theory, an idea about digital archaeology in the wild between learning and doing is shaped. And this slide represents very, very much our empirical findings. On this, we saw that people talked about hypergranular workflows and digital tools, which they juxtaposed in a way in an ambiguous relationship with notions of craft. They mentioned embodied knowledge. They mentioned DIY archaeology. Mentioned things that happen on the fly. Getting hands dirty, cobbling things together. There was a variety of expressions. This is not comprehensive, but really transcend this dimension between from learning on the one end to the development and the recognition of expertise in the middle to how they do their work, how they conduct field work at the end. And this led us to this kind of proto-idea, first of all, about what they might explain this. We saw that there is this kind of two different discourses, axial discourses that are shaping what they say. One is a discourse of craft versus efficiency, and the other was a discourse of technocracy versus agency. And these things play ambiguously in their minds. There are considerations that they need to keep in mind at the time. They want to be able to reclaim agency from digital tools, but on the other side, they recognize how these digital tools allow work to be conducted more efficiently. So for the next step of their work, what we want is really to be able to look at this from the point of view of semiosphere theory, perhaps see how things that they say in the middle that are ambiguous about those tools and their application are really constituting a boundary zone. What is the language that they use, and what are the tropes, the rhetorical tropes, the metaphors that they're using in order to be able to express and to constitute this middle ground of people who at the same time are critical archaeologists. Here we have some of the most critical people in the field in terms of how they employ digital technologies, people like Bill Caraher, who is also published on the subject, but also at the same time recognize the need to engage with digital technology and to engage, not just critical by moving away from it. So this is the things that I want to say. I want just to mention that the study is being funded by CERC, the Research Council of Canada, and the methodological work draws directly from work that we conducted within ARKWORK Working Group 3, but also in another project in the context of DARIA, the DARIA Infrastructure Digital Humanities Working Focus small-scale project. And if any of you are interested to find out more, or if you want to have a copy of our paper that we submitted for publication, to give us comments on that, please write to me and I'll be happy to send you a copy.